All right, so it's 6:35. I guess it's time to get started. I'm going to introduce Ted real quick, and then Ted will go into his talk. So Ted Hinrichs is a painter based in Kansas City, Missouri. He took a non-traditional path to his art career, beginning first as a business major at Kansas University, where he soon discovered that his elective art classes were far more interesting. He discovered an aptitude for creative thinking, a love for creative challenges, and a desire to create works he could share with others. Ted changed his major, took more art classes, and graduated with a BA in liberal arts. It would be some time before he joined the art industry, as he completed his military service and entered the business world, where he remained for 30 years. During this time, his passion for art continued to develop while his unorthodox business plan became successful. When an offer to purchase his company was presented, he took it and never looked back. Hinrichs entered the Kansas City Art Institute the following year, spent 2 years in the painting department, and began his art career immediately afterward. Without further ado, I give you Ted Hinrichs.
Hello, I'm Ted, and I would like to say that as I'm going through this, I don't mind interruptions. If anybody have questions, actually, I would work off questions better than just going through my monologue. So please feel free, Ada or Brittany, to ask me questions, or Marissa, Isabel, it's perfectly fine. I'm going to start out with my favorite artists. And I have really enjoyed Wassily Kandinsky and Gustav Klimt. They're a little bit different and yet kind of the same at the same time. I of course, am an abstract artist, so Kandinsky really kind of showed me the way towards, it kind of showed me the way to abstraction, and through some of his books. Also with Gustav Klimt, I always enjoyed the patterns and the lines, and how every little portion of what he does is a separate painting. It's like putting several different paintings together to make a whole. And I have tried to do that in some of my work as well. So those are my favorites. In fact, we just bought a new couch, and I had to go out and get a Wassily Kandinsky pillow and a Gustav Klimt pillow to go along with the new couch, which Nina's my wife. And Nina has finally started to think, hey, they're a little weird, but maybe it's okay. Okay, so I'm going to move on. I'm starting with this because I do my work in section or series. Usually a series is started by an event that happens, and then I start to investigate that event, and then I start to journal that event. In this case, it happened to be a mission trip that Nina and I took to Guatemala. This is a picture of a compound that little girls that were able to be rescued in Guatemala and taken away from abusive situations where they were sold as prostitutes or whatever the case might be. And missionaries are taking care of them. My job was, as you can see, that there's that huge door, which is necessary because there's a very valuable commodity inside those doors. But to build the security hut right next to it, so still need to put the roof on it. Anyway, as we were taking this trip, it became very clear to me that a difference between hope and despair, and how people reacted when they had hope, and also how they reacted with other people in despair. And that is an example of my first series. I also did a time series, which I was asked the question. Everyone knows my Christian background. I don't hide that at all. And someone asked me, well, Ted, do you really believe that the earth was created in 7 days? And I said, yes, but I don't think we believe that we understand exactly what time is. I think that when we look at it a little harder, that we're going to find that time maybe warps. Maybe we stand in one place and it's moving much faster than another place. So I ask questions like that, and that's how my series seem to evolve. I just hope this is the other picture that I have, and it shows the hope side. This is a town that all of the men, but a few, had been killed because they didn't pay for protection. The same missionaries went in and helped and brought their own force. And now there's little girls going to school, and everything is returning back to a normal situation. Okay, so I'm starting with the beginning, which is my muse begins with an infatuation with cosmology and the relationships within it. There are so many things that are going on in our world, and there's so many relationships, and our relationships are determined in large part, if we recognize it or not, by things that are going on within this cosmos that we live in. And whether it was created, whether it just appeared, we're still influenced by what goes on. So I have painted this with those questions in mind. It is somewhat turbulent, and yet you can see the patterns of some stability within it as well, with the green and the ocean in my mind, and yet there's the burning in the background that contradicts the blue in the middle. Please go ahead and ask questions if you want. When I go to my studio and start work on a project, or anytime that I go, it really hasn't been because of a revelation it had. Instead, it's probably a question that I had. I journey, and it's a journey that I take, and I kind of chronicle as I go along, and I add layers to my paintings. This one is Elijah and the Burning Altar. It's an Old Testament story, and Elijah is one of the last prophets for the God we know, and all of the Ahab, who is the king, and his group of prophets have taken over, and they are very bad. And in this situation, Elijah is the last prophet, and he's heckling the prophets of Baal and telling them that we're going to have a test. And at the end of the test, God brings down fire, which laps up all of the water and burns all of the prophets of Baal. And my question is, gosh, why is there a bad world? Why is there bad in the first place? Why did God have to create a world in which he had to do something like this? I don't answer the questions, I just paint them. The questioning nature comes natural to me. And I also teach a class, or I should say that I promote a discussion class. I have facilitation. It's the same basic things. We take questions like, how can I have faith? And just look at them, and there is no, I don't teach it, I don't tell anyone. We just discuss it and come up with our own answers. In this case, that's the same way with this. I was looking at Jacob and how the angels descend. You remember Jacob in the dream, and the angels descend and they also ascend. What does that mean? Why is that dream relevant? Why is it in an Old Testament story? This is Elijah, a wonderful prophet. They're beautiful. These stories are beautiful, and they're also poignant today as much as they were before. This is a story that is of Elijah going to a widow. He's hungry, and he goes to the widow and asks her for a meal. And the widow says that, I only have enough meal for myself and my son, and we are dying. And he says, if you make me a meal, I will take care of it. She believes, and when she believes, all of a sudden there's enough food for her, for Elijah, and to take care of her forever. In these stories, go ahead, somebody have a question? Also in these stories, we see that a language is coming. It comes from the agriculture, and then it comes through prophets, and we're starting to see a new language in prophets. This is three of them. One of them is the one we just saw. The other one on the left, Elijah is fed by the ravens. And in these stories, Elijah is told what to do, and he does it without question because he knows that it is from a higher being. And we see what happens when we have this unquestioning loyalty. And so on the left is Elijah and the ravens, and I made another series of those. This is a kind of a jump back in time. This is with Abraham, but the colors in this represent the desert. I happened to open a book of Africa of one of my neighbors. All of these colors appeared. So these are the colors of the desert, and somewhere in there you might find the three visitors. And they are important. They also visit Gomorrah, and I think we know what the story of Gomorrah is when they don't receive them as guests. We're starting to see also that in my work that I'm starting to copy these prophetic visions. And this is one by Ezekiel, a vision of hope after the Israelites have been conquered and are in exile, exile. And this is my painting of that. I love the purples of the desert, and this is kind of a small painting. I'm going to also do a big one of that one. A story also in exile. This time they're in Persia. This is a story of Hadash, or we know her mostly as Esther, and Xerxes. And this is in the room, one of the rooms in the palace. I also have added some gold metal to this one that represents, in my mind, what the palace might be like, and the colors of Persia and that might be there, the colors of royalty and so on. This one is, there is a story of Abraham and Lot. and they grow, their families grow to a point where they need to leave each other. Lot chooses to go to the city where everything is available. Abraham, on the other hand, chooses to go into the desert and chooses what I'm going to say is mystery. He has faith that he will be taken care of. And we know that what happens with Abraham, and we also know what happens to Lot. I talk about languages, and we started out with kind of an agrarian language that is mostly rules and what you need to do to survive. And we moved on to the prophetic languages. And then we have the languages, if in Christian thinking, we have the language of Jesus and the languages of his stories. And then from there, we enter a new age. And what age is it that what language is it that might be in the future? And I painted this painting thinking about, as if we move on, is there a spiritual language that we're going to have that teaches us more about this cosmic energy? The red certainly is a background that I enjoyed using, and all of the colors and the movement. I see the language as a movement with a contrast to the background. This is experimenting with new ideas and new ways of painting. I'm becoming more abstracted. I'm becoming to like more just putting down what I'm feeling at the time. More than the journal, it is an instant reaction to what I'm feeling and put it down and see what happens. This is one of those experiments. This is one of them also. I do, however, continue to start with concepts. I started with acceptance, and this one is contemplation. It's kind of when I reach that point of thinking what I'm contemplating right now and what I want to put on paper or on canvas. Well, and this is basically where that's the last of my pictures. Basically where I'm sitting right now is in that gray stool. I'm sure that's exciting. And this is the rest of the studio. And this is where I make my frames. And that's all.
So I have a question, Ted.
Okay.
I wanted to ask what exactly is the series of paintings is called Ancient Literature, and I wanted to ask what exactly ancient literature is to you, and why did you name the series Ancient Literature?
Okay, because when I get to when I'm looking at the cosmos, and then kind of coming out of that, and humans start to come into play, and I talked about the agricultural portion of it. I've been also fascinated with the stories that are told in the Old Testament, because it really is a chronicle, not only of a faith, but also of human interaction. And the stories, they have a lot of the same human needs that we have now. A lot of them are very much the same. However, the society is much smaller, so we have different languages that we use, even though we have some of the same feelings. And it also helps me to understand by looking back and see what happens. It also helps me right now to see those stories, to understand that there is a current that continues to go throughout humanity, that and a language that we need to have between each other in order to survive and have relationships.
We have a question in the chat from Brittany Noriega.
Brittany,
She
yes.
asks, does the name acceptance refer to accepting new ideas?
Yes, and if you would ask the rest of that question, and yes. Accepting new ideas is very much a part of what I do in my discussion groups. Not only do I present ideas or try and bring out ideas, but I need to be willing myself to be able to accept that there are other ideas that people have, and people need, and people will make up their own mind. I also believe in acceptance of people, whoever they are. And if I go back to my background, I want to be sure that I don't present judgment from what I believe, that I accept that other people are other people. That answer your question, Brittany?
I have another question, Ted. I wanted to know, where does your sense of abstraction come from?
I actually visualize it sometimes. I actually will have a vision. I had an instructor a long time ago. In fact, it was at a Longview school, and he said, "Where do you get these things?" And I was telling him, "You get these from your noggin?" I said, "Yeah, I think they come from my noggin. I just I will I not only add to my abstractions, I also subtract. I will go through, put things down. The next layer may be a subtraction of what I put down. So that is, and so the abstraction kind of comes about as I look at whatever question I'm happen to be working on at the time.
Do you think abstraction can be a sort of like spiritual practice? I feel like it is in your paintings.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It can be meditative. Sometimes it ain't. But I think that every artist falls into that mode where it's just, wow, this is it. I know it's that I've got the feeling, and yeah, it clicks at that point sometime. And abstraction for me is a portion of that. It's not exactly what it looks like, it's how it makes me feel.
Yeah. Can I ask a question about the influence of the two artists that you referred to in the beginning? That's
sure,
really
Ada.
fun to see where that comes in. I'm not an art historian. Kandinsky, I know just a little bit about, but I think he used to tell a lot of stories with his early works before he got into the geometric abstracts.
You know, and another thing, Ada, about Kandinsky is that he came from an entirely different background as a lawyer, and I come from a background of experiences for a big part of my life that were entirely apart from art.
Right.
And it's almost as though Kandinsky and myself I don't want to say we analyze it more, what we're doing, but it certainly comes from a point of analyzing because we are comparing it to a life before that. And in Kandinsky's point of view, he also compared his abstraction to music, and
Oh,
how you're familiar with that.
right.
Every note is painting within itself, or is it important to the painting as the whole crescendo is? And I just love that idea when you go that everything you're putting on there is important.
So I'd like to take that over to I think that they're the more recent ones you were talking about, the ones you label experiments.
Yes.
I find that in those you're moving from just the shapes and the layers of shapes into more linear connections, or is there something fun going on there that's new?
Yes, there is. It is far more of a reaction or an action. It's far more of an impulse than the others are pretty much that I think about them and before I put them down.
Mhm.
And I guess I think about those as well, but it is more of a reaction. It is more of my feelings, my being is coming out and I want to just put it down the way that my being is at that moment, my inner self, if that makes any sense.
Oh, sure. And then the other one that really stands out to me as being quite different is the language one.
Mm-hmm.
So was that really different for you? Because it feels to me like it's quite different than any of the others.
It was a kind of a break from some that from the more heady ones, or the especially the Hope series was. I mean, I really soaked into that one. There was a dark, certainly a dark and a light part of that Hope series, and out of that, the spiritual series was more fun. It was more like really looking at something abstract. So I did several of those.
Yeah. Well, thank you. They're just all stunning. I really enjoy them.
Oh gosh, thanks, Ada. I appreciate that.
Hey Ted, this is Rob. How are you?
Hey Rob, I'm fine. How are you doing?
Doing great. Is that a diptych behind you? Because it's wonderful.
No,
Oh,
it's
I love
actually
side by side.
now, you know,
was
it is now. Now it's
Okay.
not.
Okay,
No, I
I
just
just saw those two perfectly aligned. I was like, maybe that's a diptych.
no. Actually, the one on the one on the far right, and then there's one that is more of a rectangle on the left. That could be a triptych with two others that I did.
Okay, awesome.
I didn't put them up that way, but they could be. And
Well, I think that would be a great way to make like a narrative, especially as you're going back in like historical context. That would be awesome.
you know, that's a great idea, Rob. I like that idea. I have done that. I did that in my time series where I would have time flow from one picture to the next.
Thank you so much, Ted. Those are great.
Well, gosh, thank you, thank you. I'm glad I'm honored that you enjoy them.
Well, I really do enjoy them. That's for sure.
I have another question for you, Ted.
Okay.
I mentioned it a little bit in the beginning, but I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about your artistic background and training and how that influenced you.
Okay. My first knowledge of artistic ability is in grade school when I think it was like a summer school, and I was working on some sort of a science project that, you know, all the boys were supposed to. And my teacher, I kind of got bored with it. So I drew a rocket and some other stuff. And the teacher said, Ted, you're in the wrong place. You ought to be in the art part of this. And well, okay, that's the first time I ever thought about it. Then I always doodled and did things like that. When I went to college, and I thought that I might want to be a businessman. And at that point, if you had a college degree, you pretty much could get a job. And so I was in the business department, and it came up that there was an art class available. And I've always been interested in this. I'd like to take it. And I just fell in love with the art class, and the opportunity came for me to take more classes as I got out of the business portion of it, just got a liberal arts degree. And I started doing painting, and then when I was out, as you heard in the bio from Isabel, I was in the business world then and pretty much put painting aside. It was a competitive knockdown. It took your entire energy in order to do the business. And so when I had the opportunity to sell the business, it was like this. If you can see me, it was like, no. I'm shaking my head, yes, and saying no. And it took a couple of years of negotiations, but as soon as I was done with that, I entered the art school. And I actually, more of that, Ada, was they allowed me, they looked at my portfolio and allowed me to skip a year, which was a horrible mistake. I missed all of the introductory stuff that now I've got to go back, read about, and learn on my own. But I did certainly learn a lot about how to think. There you go, a long-winded answer to that question.
And how do you think that like your artistic training sort of impacts the way you view art now or approach your own artistic practice? Like, do you think you come at it with like an academic eye, or do you think you come at it with like different sort of perspectives because you had such varied training throughout your life?
That's very interesting. And when I entered the Art Institute and needed to take some art history classes, I thought that would be boring and unnecessary. But I find that I go back, well, to Kandinsky, to Klimt, and other artists and art history, and read art history, love art history. The fact that when a country is conquered, the first thing that they take is all of the art because it means so much. And it means a lot, and it has come to mean the same to me. Art history is an incredible part of these ancient languages and so on. These are great questions, you guys. Lay them on me.
And don't they get rid of the artists too before a war because those are the influence?
Yeah, well, you at least are told what you've got to paint, or you don't. You don't sell it. That's for sure. You
Right.
either paint Napoleon, or you get, and it gets bought, or it doesn't get bought.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Ted, I had another question.
Sure, Rob.
All right, cool. So like your work speaks, what you've talked about, I came in a little bit late, speaks to work that, you know, we can find in like Hebraic and Islamic and Christian canons. Do any of your other works speak to like other historical narratives? I missed that part if you talked about it.
I have a language series that does talk about, and well, and the title of this one is Ancient Languages, and I don't know when you came in, as if I'm repeating something, but I used Old Testament for most of my muse in creating these series of paintings of old stories and how they relate, how we relate to them, and how things are the same, how things are different. And so, yes, I do use that. Rob, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
I feel like I got sidetracked, you know?
No, you're fine. You're fine. No, that
Okay.
was, yeah, no, that was a great answer. So are you like with your future work,
Mhm.
you feel like that's may branch out from like the narrative that you're on now?
Yes.
Awesome. And can you give us a hint on what that might be?
Yes. I think it is the latter paintings that you saw are going to be more instantaneous. Going to be more from the heart, more from my thoughts than a reaction to it, rather than well thought out depictions of these questions. I want to just react.
Wow. Yeah, I can't wait to see that. Awesome.
I can't wait for you to see them too.
Me too.
Do you see your paintings as like reactionary?
No, they're pretty much, they were, up until this time, pretty well thought out. I would draw them out. In fact, I have pages of drawings, and just figure out the exact shapes that I thought would mimic what I wanted to do, what I wanted to portray, what colors went together to make the these stories come to life, how they would react it to each other. Would that be the same as how the people in the narrative would react as a viewer, what you would think of what the questions were in these paintings? And I think that'll still be a part of it, but I hope to be able to put it down in more of a reactionary mode than so much thought going into it previously.
I see. So you mentioned that your paintings are well thought out. I wanted to know what your artistic process looks like. Like, you're going to sit down and make a painting. What does that look like for you?
Generally, I start out with the ideas of what I want to do, and I'll sit down and do several pages of drawings, and I will go back through, as Ada asked about my historical look into artwork. I will go back and look through other painters and see what their approach was. I will and a lot of times I will go to Gustav Klimt and look at how he told a narrative, or how he did his interactions with color and shape. And I will draw those out. I'll try those colors. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I can't hear you, Marissa.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Muted all over the place. It seems like your work has, or at least the ones with the prophets have a lot of story behind them, but without the title and without the explanation, just to your average everyday viewer, it might be difficult for them to suss out what your intention is or what the story is. How important is it to you that the viewer or even a collector knows the background or knows the story and correlation that you were working through when you made your pieces?
Marissa, that was an issue. It was. As I got into the paintings many times, the original thought became other thoughts. However, I enjoyed the original thought as well. And it's when we were talking about setting up the show, that I would actually have some written things to look at, and with those questions on them, and to look at the painting then and see if you could if you could make some of that out. One of the things was, though, Marissa, that I really enjoyed was, in the opening, how many people I had long discussions with, explaining what my process was in order to abstract my thoughts on these particular stories. So in that regard, it really worked with just the title and the painting.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it definitely, when you see it first, you don't necessarily read any sort of storytelling or maybe even faith connection or spiritual connection to the work. Not necessarily like in first viewing. Some people may have a really spiritual experience. I'm not saying they don't. But when you see the title, you realize that there's a story behind it. And I'm just interested. We've had other shows that have been deeply connected to that individual's faith and stories surrounding religious text. And they've included those stories so that there is no question about what that is. So I was just interested to know your take on that. And I think that answers it, but thank you.
Well, no, I have more of an answer to that. Again, in my experiences, it's the questioning, it's the journey that is what's important. If I put a title on there and it's a story, and the show is ancient stories or ancient language, and it kind of makes you go, huh? But you look at the painting, that's okay. And I would hope that someone would, I wonder why it's like that.
I do think it invites audience to really look, it may invite your audience to look at it with some duality. You know, they see it first as an abstract painting, but then they see the title and they're like, wait, do I need to look harder, deeper? What's going on here? Or what's this story? How does it relate? I think it's interesting.
Well, it is, and that was an issue all the way through. But when I was there, it was really cool. I even had someone ask me if I to get the email address for my class.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
How do you go about choosing which stories you want to like depict in your paintings?
It'll be one that hits me. it'll be, there's a constant flow of either they show up in a discussion or reading or just thinking about something goes on in regular life that I relate, excuse me, to an experience in one of those stories. And I'll just, they're also interesting that it's just a matter of choosing the one that comes to you or to me.
And do you see like, because you talk a lot about like literature and language a lot. Do you see painting as and like abstraction as its own kind of language in which you can like tell stories?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have 10 minutes left. I just want to ask real quick before we leave, if anyone else has questions, feel free to type it in the chat box or unmute yourself. Thank you so much, Ted. This was really great.
Well, thank you, Isabel. And I don't want to leave your question hanging. Yes, I do think of it as a language, and it's a really a neat language because it's something you have to think about. I love the child that, well, it was the young man that was with the family that bought the painting, and he said, in fact, this was said to me twice by two kids, and said, "I love it when you leave it to my imagination." You know, and so I think in that respect, yeah, it's a language. I like the kids got it.
Great
That's
show.
awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Ada.
Ted.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, I appreciate this so much, and an opportunity to voice what I'm doing, and the opportunity to show is. I just can't say how much. Okay, the hair standing up on my arm right now.
Brittany said, "Thank you, Ted. It is a stunning show."
Oh gosh, coming from you, Brittany, that is really that really makes me feel good. I love your artwork too.
All right. Bye. Good night.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.